Hi guys, thanks for tuning in. So this video is going to be a little bit different. It's something I don't think I've ever brought up before. Now, I've had a couple of comments recently and over a couple of previous videos asking about which decks and boosters to buy and stuff like that. So in this video I'm going to basically go through very briefly basically the two sets which are out very briefly, as well as the decks and trying to help you guys figure out if you're interested in buying some of the game, which deck might be best suited to yourself, so that A, you're not wasting any money, and B, you're playing the game for something which you prefer in your own personal preference, because you wouldn't want to buy a deck and then think, no, this isn't for me, just because it's not the way you want to play or anything like that. So as you can see on screen, you've got my store, the GameCrafter store here. We'll be going through most of these on screen. So just to get the two different sets out of the way first, we've got basically GVE, which is Good versus Evil, and WAE, which is the War Against the Elements. So GVE is basically set 1. It's done and dusted. It finished about a year and a half ago or something like that. So as you can see on screen, some of these decks have got GVE vertically on the screen. As well as like the booster pack there, that one's got GVA. And then some of the other ones have got WAE, which is, Deck of the Aegis, Fire and Ice, Deck of the Storm, and that booster pack there. And the booster box will also come with WAE boosters. Now the golden boosters, you will get one golden booster in the booster box, contains cards from both sets, WAE and GVE. The main differences between those two are A, the borders. Now, because GVE is the first set, the borders are going to be off a little bit. Well, not off, but they're the old style borders. However, I have recently changed the rares and the royalty rare borders to match the WAE borders, just to give them a little bit more, what's the word, like linearity, can I say that word? A little bit more linear, so that they look like the newer cards. Unfortunately, I don't have time to do every single card in GVE, so that's that. As for the play style in GVE, it's not bad. We can get a lot of powerful cards because it is set 1. It's like basically when Magic the Gathering first came out. There was some really OP cards in that set. So in GVE you can find a lot more powerful cards. Whereas in WAE, all cards have got the new border. And there's a lot more tacticality between them. So, you're kind of meddling with your opponent's cards rather than your own, and so on and so forth. So, now I'm going to get straight into the decks now because I'm already waffling on. So, I'm going to split this video down into two different types of genres, which, there's going to be two things you're going to be looking for in a deck. Are you going to be looking for the easiest and the hardest decks to play with? Or are you looking for something in particular as to how the way the decks play out? So the first part, I'm going to get the easiest bit out of the way, is the difficulty. So this part is if you're looking for a difficulty rating on these decks. And these are my own personal preferences. If you've got your own personal, if you think a card is, a lot more difficult to play than how I say it in here, then be sure just to leave a comment down below. So we've got 6 decks. We have got the Deck of Ages, we've got the Deck of Fire and Ice, Deck of a Storm, Deck of Honor, Deck of Darkness, and the Deck of the Wilds. And these can all be purchased here on the GameCrafter. So we have got 3 easy decks to play with first off. So 50% of the decks are designed to be easy to play. And the first one is going to be from GVE, which is the Deck of the Wilds. Now, we can load it up here. So, Deck of the Wilds, we get all these bits and bobs in here. So, we have 51 cards in every starter deck. You get a die which is colour themed on the deck. You get your 13 elements which come included. You get a rule booklet, and of course you get an extra booster pack from that set to help you try and adjust and edit your starter deck so that you're not just playing with the same deck over and over again. So this is probably the easiest deck to play with. I'll come across, everything in the second half of the video. Now the second easiest deck to play with is going to be the Deck of the Ages. Now this is somewhat similar to the Deck of Honor, however I personally think this is a lot easier to play with than the Deck of Honor, because again I'll come across that shortly. So again, the Deck of Honor comes with all these bits and bobs, your boost pack and stuff. So this is going to be like the second easiest, because it's just a deck of humans which are going to be what you're going to be buffing up. So again, it's a very easy deck to use. And then the third easiest deck to use is the newest one, which is the Deck of the Storm. And this is very like, how can I say? I don't want to say the word electrifying because of the name. However, this is quite. If you could imagine a white version of Burn from Magic the Gathering, this is practically that, as well as a lot of powerful units. This is probably the most aggressively deck created in Wrath of Course for the time being. So this is actually one of my favourite decks to play with. So moving on to the medium difficulty, we have got the Deck of Honor. Now I know a lot of you have seen this Deck of Honor in play, and it does win a lot of games. However, you know, it is a very tanky deck, and it's tricky to explain, but the only reason what makes this a medium difficulty is the fact that it plays a lot with the ranged abilities. So if you've never played Wrath of Course before, you might get a little bit confused with ranged. Ranged is basically, you know, there's a bonus. Any units you've got to play with ranged will deal their damage before all non-ranged units. So if you imagine like an archer, you know, he's going to shoot his bow and arrow before a swordsman gets to him. So that's kind of how the ranged works. So it is a really powerful ability. However, it can be a little tricky to understand if you've never played Wrath of Course before. So, but what makes that deck good is that it's basically a tank. You know, it's really hard to get that HP and that health down because it's the most powerful core we've got in the game. The next is the second. In fact, there's no more medium. We're going straight into hard. So the next hard. The first of the two hardest decks is going to be Deck of Darkness. Now what makes this hard is basically the HP. It's probably got one of the lowest HP ratings in the game. You play in black and red, so as you can tell it's very dark. You know, there's a lot of fire and death kind of mixed into this one. And you're not playing a lot of instant destruction in the deck. You're basically meddling with your opponent more than anything. So, you know, you're going to be lowering your opponent's attack values, you're going to be making them discard cards, you're going to be forcing certain units to defend so that you can have your way with them, kind of thing. So that is the Deck of the Darkness. And then finally, the last deck, which is probably one of the hardest to play with, is the Deck of Fire and Ice. Now, what makes this one hard is, it's got a decent core unit. It's got 7.1 thousand HP, which is about average nowadays. However, it's slow. The majority of the units require about 3 elements, and most of them require of the same. So, you know, if you're playing the red half of this deck, you know, you're going to need at least 3 red elements to get the red units out. If you're playing the blue elements, you're going to need 3 blue elements. So it's going to be tricky to get your landscape into the way you want it to work. However, for the time being, while you're waiting for them terrains to come out, you know, there is a lot of like red burn cards in the deck to help you try and just fend off like early enemy units, just to start. You know, you can take a little bit damage, but you know, you're kind of running that risk. Are you gonna take the damage and see how it plays and then wait for your units to come out, or are you going to basically kill them off as early as possible and you know, risk your hand getting quite low? So yeah, that's the difficulty factor of this video. So if you want something easy, go for Deck of the Ages, go for Deck of the Wilds and Deck of the Storm. I probably prefer Deck of the Storm and the Deck of the Wilds over the 3 of them. If you want an intermediate deck, you're looking at Deck of Honor. And then if you want a hard deck to play with, so if you're either an experienced Wrath of Course player or you just want a challenge, then you want to go for the Deck of Darkness and the Deck of Fire and Ice. Now, if you're looking for something, this is the second half of the video now. we're going to go through how the decks work exactly. Well, more so not exactly that, but you know, if you're looking for a certain theme to a deck, then this, hopefully I'll try and squeeze this in real quick now. So if you want a deck which is basically, it slows down your opponent's core, you want some solid growth, which is like attack and health boosts based on things which are pretty tricky to get rid of. So for example, like relics and weapons and wonders, and you want something which has got very cheap units to get into play relatively quickly, you want to go for the Deck of Ages. If you want a deck which is, again, fast, so like cheap units to play, and instead of having like some solid growth, you want some surprising growth, such as, you know, actions and battle cards and wonders and, you know, stuff like that. You want to go for the Deck of the Wilds, because we've got, you know, you've got Cellular Burst, you've got Restricting Vines, you've got Hidden Tunnel. You're kind of tucking your opponent's units away as a surprise in the battle phase, and then obviously your core can boost up your own units to, you know, give them a nice little pump, as well as action cards and battle cards like Cellular Burst, what can, you know, really throw some heavy damage in. You know, if you time it correctly, you could probably get 1,000 damage in before turn 3 or something like that. So that's the Deck of the Wilds. Pardon me. Then you've got, if you want a deck which is, again, you're going to be dealing with mostly one colour elements, the Deck of a Storm, because there's a lot of white elemental units in that deck, and the deck basically throws like an umbrella over its own units. So again, you're dealing with white elemental units. You know, you've got your core can basically buff all your units if you wanted to, but if you've got white elemental units, it gives them an additional buff on top of that. Then you've got cards like the Wonder and the Relics. So, you know, the Wonder is Wild Thunderstorm. Your Wild Thunderstorm basically makes your white elemental units immune to your enemy action cards and stuff like that. So, you know, again, it throws an umbrella over it. Arc Totem is a really good one. Basically, whenever any elemental unit comes into play, your opponent's core is going to lose health. You can have 2 of them in a deck. You know, really, really powerful. And if they're playing the Deck of Fire and Ice or an elemental deck, they're going to be losing HP left, right, and centre. The Deck of a Storm also comes with a lot of white removal as well, white being the cards you play, such as Spark, Havoc Elemental, Thunderbolt, the Spider, Thunder Spider, Lightning Spider. Its royalty rare is actually an action card, which is a really, really powerful action card, and that focuses on removal. You know, there's also a hint of enemy hand discard and terrain mana netting and stuff like that. You know, there's multiple different ways where you can make your opponent lose cards out of their hand. You can hold back their terrain cards from generating elements and stuff like that. So a Deck of a Storm is a really powerful deck to be playing with. Next up, if you want a deck which is basically really powerful units with a bit of burn, then you want Fire and Ice, as mentioned before. You can use the gemstones to increase how many elements your terrains generate. You know, you can get them out by turn 2 if you've got them in your hand, and they will generate additional elements. These will obviously pay for your more powerful units, because powerful units cost more elements to get into play. Your royalty rare is probably one of the strongest royalty rares in the entire game, which is Crystal Golem. You can use any colour elements to play for it, and then when it comes into play, you can search your consume pile for free cards and whack them back in your hand. So, you know, of course, there's going to be a lot of burn in this deck as well. So, you know, Fire and Ice if you want, you know, a lot of destruction and a lot of powerful units, but obviously at a slower pace, then this will be the deck for you. As mentioned before, if you want to card what medals with your opponent's hand, you're going to be sacrificing a lot of units. Then you want to go for the Deck of Darkness, which is basically cards like Withering Boon, Shattered Memories, Hoodoo Sorcerer, Ball and Chain, Dubious Law. All these cards will basically meddle with your opponent and, you know, prevent them from playing cards and stuff like that. So that's the Deck of the Darkness. It's a little bit harder to play because your core's got less health, but you know, that is the way that deck works, unfortunately. And then finally, if you want, basically you're going to know what's coming up now. The Deck of Honor, a tanky deck. You know, it's got the most powerful deck out. I think it's got over 8,000 HP. There's a lot of health recovery in it. All the units are cheap to play. Your units, a lot of your units have got the ranged ability, which is mentioned earlier. You've got your Elixir of Restoration, your Obelisk of War, your Counter Activity, your Defensive Tactics, all this to support your deck. You know, a lot of this, especially the Obelisk, which can re-roll, say a unit of yours misses, you can re-roll it. And make sure, you know, give it an extra opportunity to hit in battle. And then of course it comes with, I'd say, probably the second most powerful royalty rare in the game, which is the Angel. You know, if not more powerful than the Crystal Golem. This thing never misses. It's a giant meat stick. You know, just looking at its abilities on screen, it's an absolute menace to try and take down. So that's the Deck of the Honor. So hopefully this video has encouraged you to, you know, focus. If you were willing to buy a deck and you were trying to think about which deck you'd like to look into buying, then these are the 6 options what you've got available to you. So yeah guys, that's going to be this video. I kind of hope that it has encouraged you to purchase, well, not necessarily purchase, but you know, think carefully about what you want to purchase, because you know the decks, you know, they're not exactly the cheapest on the Game Crafted, but they do come with a lot of stuff in the decks, and you know, I don't really make anything off these anyway, so we've got everything on store, as you can see on screen. Yeah, so that's going to be this video, guys. I kind of hope, well, in fact I really do hope that it's helped you guys focus on something rather than just picking out a random deck off a Game Crafter and buying something which, you know, you're not necessarily fond of, just because you picked the wrong deck over, you know, the deck what would suit you the best. Anyway guys, this video has probably gone on longer than expected, so yeah, thanks for tuning in guys, and I shall see you soon.